Applying for jobs with the state of Montana, produced by the Montana Department of Labor, Missoula Job Service, Workforce Center.
Our purpose is to give you an overview of the process you go through to apply for positions with the state of Montana. This is a multi-step, very structured process. We're going to break each step down so you avoid common mistakes we see. First, you find out about what positions are available by looking online, or they are posted at your local job service. Second, you review the vacancy announcement. Now, this may be a term you're unfamiliar with, but it is a very important document. The vacancy announcement tells details about the job, how to apply, and what is required to submit with your application. Next is the state application. This document is the heart of the process and is required with every position you may be interested in applying for. It will be reviewed and scored by the hiring authority to see if you meet the minimum qualifications. The position you're interested in may also require supplements as part of your application. We'll tell you how do you determine if they are required, what they are, and tips so that you can be successful. Remember, in this process, many aspects are scored, so be specific and don't leave any details out about your experience. All this combined will determine if you get an interview, and if you get an interview, you get a chance for the job. So although this may all seem overwhelming, if you give yourself enough time and take it step by step, you can be successful. So let's get started.
Hello, my name is Wolfgang Ametsbichler, manager of the Missoula Job Service Workforce Center. I want to commend you for taking the time to watch this video. It is very obvious that you're being proactive and you're investing the time up front before applying. As a hiring manager, I have reviewed countless applications, and it becomes fairly obvious when someone has not put forth their best effort. A good state application takes more than 1 hour to complete. The points made in this video are to help you avoid some of these mistakes. Our most essential advice is read the announcement carefully. It contains details and instructions that differ from agency to agency and are unique to each. We'll give you lots of ideas and examples. However, don't feel that these are the only answers. They are only meant for you as guidance to take your own work experience and apply it to each of the positions you're applying for. You can call the state agency that you're applying to and ask additional questions. The phone number is always listed on the vacancy announcement. In addition, you may call any employment consultant at any Montana Job Service office, and they will be more than happy to assist you. Employment consultants from the Missoula Job Service in this presentation are Nancy Mouche, Paula Marcinkowski, and Annie Rubens. Once again, I congratulate you on taking the time and making the effort to watch this video, and I wish you all the best in your pursuit of employment with the state of Montana.
This video is broken into 6 sections. Section 1, Vacancy Announcement. Section 2, Application Formats. Section 3, Completing the Application. Section 4, Supplement Required. Section 5, Submitting your application. And Section 6, Interviews. Vacancy Announcement.
I'm going to talk about the vacancy announcement, where you can find it, and how to read it. To get a hard copy, visit any Montana Job Service, or you can get it from the internet by visiting the website www.discoveringmontana.com/statejobs. Click on the blue box named State Job Listings. You will see all the vacancies throughout the state. They are listed in alphabetical order by position title. When you click on the specific position title, the full vacancy announcement will appear. It's a good idea to print it so you can refer back to it as you complete your application and other materials that may be required. Now let's look at how to read the vacancy announcement. Here are a few things you may want to keep in mind. Each vacancy announcement is unique, so it is important to read it thoroughly to be sure that you complete your application as required. You may see unfamiliar terms in the announcement. Since each state agency has a website you can go to, you may want to research any part you are not familiar with. Let's start with the top portion of the announcement. Since each announcement is unique, you may not see all of the categories we are covering in our example. The first section will show the department, date posted, position number and title, location, salary, a yes or no if supplements are required, and other information pertaining to the position type. The next section lists when applications need to be received, where you can submit your application. It will have the agency's address, phone, fax, and other possible ways to contact them. You will hear more about that later in our presentation. As you look at the next sections to the announcement, note that some section headings will vary and each section has specific details you must follow. Don't panic if your announcement varies slightly from our example. The Special Information section has unique information about the job. Here are some examples of what might be included. More information about the job location, rotating shifts, or if travel is required. The Duties section includes the working conditions, physical demands of the job, and essential duties of the position. This is where you can find out what you would be doing on a typical day on the job. Competencies are listed next. These are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are needed to successfully perform the essential duties of your job. The hiring authority will be looking at your application materials to see how well you match the competencies required for the position. The Education and Experience section states the minimum education and experience required. For most positions, alternate methods of obtaining these necessary qualifications will be considered. This section may also state specific coursework required. The next section tells you the application materials you need to submit with the State of Montana employment application. And since each position is unique, the materials required can vary. It could include testing certificates, transcripts, supplemental question responses, and other documentation. Your application will not be considered if you don't meet the minimum testing requirements or fail to submit any required documents. To ensure your application is complete, you may want to refer back to this section. The last section to the vacancy announcement covers supplements. If earlier in the vacancy announcement it said yes, that supplements are required, here is where you find the details. Since supplements can be a very important part of your total application package, we will tell you more about them later. Now that you have read and understand the vacancy announcement and what is required for applying to the position you want, we'll talk about application formats.
Application formats.
Now that you've learned more about reading the vacancy announcement, it's time to look at the State of Montana employment application. In this section, we'll look at the different formats available for you to use when completing the application and where and how to obtain them. There are two formats to choose from: the hard copy, also known as the paper application, and the electronic application. Both have specific advantages. If you'd like to complete the paper application, there are a couple of ways to get one. You can pick up a copy at your local Job Service Workforce Center or print out a copy directly from your internet. By stopping at the local job service, often both formats are available, so feel free to ask the staff for a copy of that application. As a reminder, though, do not use pencil on this application. Always use ink to complete your information. If you do have access to the internet, you can download the most recently revised edition of the state application. Using your electronic application, it's easier to edit and update your information. Also, many text fields automatically expand for additional information. So you're wondering, how do you find and download your electronic application? Open your internet browser. Then, in the address bar, type in www.discoveringmontana.com/statejobs. There are several forms available to download from this page, including the State Employment Application and the Employment Preference Forms, both for veteran or disability preference. Next, click on State Employment Application. Then choose the format that's the most compatible to your computer, and there's 3 formats available to choose from. The first is Microsoft Word. Next is Rich Text. This format is best if your word processing program is Works, WordPad, or Notepad. Do not use rich text to print a hard copy. The third format is PDF. You'll need Adobe Reader to use the PDF. This format is recommended for printing if you're completing your application by hand. Now that you've chosen your format, save the blank application to a disk or hard drive. From here on, you no longer need your internet connection. Now you're ready to complete your electronic application. Start by opening the saved file in your word processing program. The cursor will appear in the last name field. By using the Tab key, you can move from field to field. In order to back up, you can use the Shift tab or use the mouse to click in any box. However, be aware there is no spell check feature available when using this electronic application. So, you've learned about both formats and applications available for you to use, how to find them, in addition to helpful information on how to download the most recent application. So in the next section, you're going to learn about completing the application.
Completing the application.
Now we are going to talk about actually completing the State of Montana application. This application is required with every position you may be interested in applying for with the State of Montana. The application starts with a couple of paragraphs of instructions at the top of the page, and they reiterate some of the important points we've been making. It says, type or print your application in ink. You do not want to submit a state application that is done in pencil. It further explains you can add additional pages if you need more room, and notes you should identify all attached pages with your name and the job title you are applying for. Notice in bold it says late, incomplete, or unsigned applications will not be considered. The next paragraph reminds you to read the vacancy announcement carefully. It is the key document so that you can be successful in this process. Now let's look at page 1, section 1. The top portion is basic identifying information. Section 2 asks, what position are you applying for? The information this asks for can be found in the top section of the vacancy announcement. It is very important to be accurate and complete in this section so your application is routed to the right department. Section 3 has 2 paragraphs. The first one states that the information you provide is subject to verification and you don't want to make any false statements. It then asks, do you want to be informed before we contact your present employer? And has 2 boxes to select, yes or no. Don't be afraid of this question. It is meant as a courtesy to applicants so their current employment is not jeopardized if you haven't had a chance to tell your boss you're applying for other positions. The last sentence of the second paragraph states, I release all persons or companies from any liability or responsibility for providing such information. This is done as a favor to you because when employers know you have signed this release, they will be more open to providing a complete reference as opposed to simply verifying dates of employment. Finally, in Section 3, you're given space to provide your signature and the date you signed. It is acceptable if your signature is either written or typed. Moving on to page 2, number 4, is education. First, it asks you for your high school name and address. Here you want to give a complete address. Next, it asks if you've received a diploma or equivalency certificate, and if not, gives you a space to fill in the highest grade you have completed. The next level of education it asks you about is college, university, and other schools. Working left to right, in the first column, you only need the name of the school and its city and state for location. In the second column, for dates attended, note that this field does not expand in the electronic version. So what you enter must be 2 numbers for the month and 2 numbers for the year. So if you received your degree in May 2003, you would say 05/03. The third column, degree or certificate received, can be a simple yes or no, but also indicate what you received. For instance, was it a Bachelor of Science, Associate of Arts degree, a diploma, or certification? The fourth column, degree/certificate date, is where you would indicate the date you received your degree or certificate, or you may also list a projected completion date. The fifth column, major or minor field, gives you an opportunity to identify the field of study you are specializing in. Finally, in the sixth column, credits earned indicate quarter or semester. You want to be sure to be accurate here because sometimes this information is used to determine if you meet minimum qualifications or have earned equivalencies in the education that is required. Now you want to remember, it also mentions you could list other schools in this section. Some examples of what you could indicate here are military training, Job Corps, or vocational or technical colleges you have attended. You want to be sure to list all of the educational opportunities that you have taken advantage of. Next, in the education section is an area for training courses. Here list professional training, such as apprenticeships or any on-the-job training positions you have had. These can be courses you have taken that are not specific to obtaining a degree and is an opportunity to demonstrate to the hiring authority that you have participated in continuing education. Perhaps you've attended a time management seminar or taken computer skills or software classes. This section finishes off with columns for name, location, dates you attended, did you complete, title or description of course, and total hours. Now, let's go to section 5, which says, list current professional licenses, registrations, or certifications. The first column is an area for listing the licensing agency, name, and location. The second column has an area for the type of license, for instance, real estate, or a licensed social worker. The third column allows you to mention any applicable endorsements or restrictions. For instance, if you are a licensed electrician, you may be certified either for residential or commercial work. The last column in section 5 is simply date license. Section 6 says, list special skills such as word processing, operating a forklift, dump truck, or computer programming. Include a list of equipment that you know how to use. You may list skills from volunteer work, like Habitat for Humanity, or from professional organizations like Toastmasters. This section asks you to list special skills that you have. This is a great opportunity to tell the hiring authority why you are qualified. Think about transferable skills. What do you know how to do that could apply to the job you are applying for? For instance, note-taking or facilitating meetings, or you could mention how many words per minute you can type. It says you may list skills from volunteer work or professional organizations. And some other examples are 4-H leader, or maybe you're the president of your homeowners association. Make sure what you put down demonstrates skills that are applicable to the position. You do not want to list hobbies or personal activities that are not work-related. Moving on to page 3, we get to section 7, experience. This section finally tells the hiring authority what you know how to do and how it applies to the position you are interested in. Do not say, "See attached resume," as a substitute for filling out this section. The instructions state, list your work and/or volunteer experience with emphasis on experience that is relevant to the position you are applying for. Begin with your present or most recent experience. Include military service that would help you qualify. List each promotion as a separate position. And use additional employment experience forms as necessary. The first block is name and complete address of employer. Here you want to provide a current mailing or physical address. If the business is no longer open, use the last known address and note business closed. For your job title, you want to be accurate and use common titles. Clarify if your title does not explain what you did. Or if you had no title, use 1 or 2 words to describe what you did. For example, bookkeeper or computer programmer. For type of business, this is not the business name. It asks for the type of business, meaning government, retail, or restaurant. Be brief, 1 to 2 words explaining the nature of the business. This is a good opportunity, however, to tie the type of business to the position you are applying for. For example, say you are applying for a training position, and among many things, your previous employer was involved with youth training. Therefore, you could list the business type as private government youth training. For immediate supervisors and phone number, often the person who was your supervisor no longer works for the company. In that case, you should still list that person's name, but you should indicate they are no longer working there. If you worked under more than one supervisor, list the most recent one, or you can list more than one name. For dates employed, average hours per week, time employed, full-time, part-time, volunteer, you don't want to leave anything blank, and contact your former employers if you don't know the dates. And when filling out your dates, be sure to keep your date style consistent. Use either numbers or spell out the months. Now you get a chance to explain your specific job duties. It says, describe your duties in detail. This is followed by knowledge, skills, behaviors required, employees supervised, and accomplishments, which are listed as hints. Focus on the position and describe the major duties you performed in detail. Review the duties and competencies section in the vacancy announcement and incorporate words used there if they apply to your experience. Some other tips for success are to use strong writing with past tense active verbs such as developed, managed, or collaborated. You want to be sure to spell out business-specific acronyms. And remember, if you don't list what you did, it will be assumed you did not do the task, and you will not get credit in the scoring process. You don't want to use blanket terms such as office manager. If you answered the phone, say so. If you filed, say so. If you provided customer service, say so. It is also a really good idea to quantify the information you provide with specific numbers or ranges. This is a great tool to strengthen your application. For instance, you saved $1.5 million in utility expenses, or supervised 18 to 20 staff, or you developed processes to reduce error rate by 10% in production, or perhaps you increased sales by 22%. This is much stronger than saying, I was the best salesman. Quantifying is essential and is a great tool to strengthen your application. Now remember, in the electronic version, the fields will expand, so be thorough and don't worry about running out of room. After describe your duties in detail, you'll see it gives some hints of what you could include. We'll look at each of these terms separately and give some ideas and examples. Now, we are not suggesting a separate paragraph for each of these words. They are just ideas of areas you could cover when discussing your duties. First, it mentions knowledge. If you address your knowledge, be specific with your statements. Instead of saying, I have knowledge of accounting, you should describe the accounting procedures and applications that you know how to use. Other examples of knowledge could be software proficiency. And what did you do with each program? For example, did you use Microsoft Word for correspondence, or Excel for spreadsheets, or Outlook for emailing and scheduling? Don't forget the knowledge you have in operating office machines, such as a fax, copier, a multi-line phone. Or maybe you have technical and professional knowledge, such as knowing how to operate or maintain computer hardware. Or you have knowledge about policies or industry-specific procedures. Or perhaps you have an area of expertise you have led staff training on. The second hint is skills. They're asking you to describe the skills you use to perform the job. Customer service is a skill, or writing, or public speaking. Perhaps you're a skilled equipment operator because you know how to operate a bobcat, forklift, or excavator. Office skills can include mention of scheduling appointments, or perhaps you created a new file system for your office. The third hint is behaviors required. What they are looking for here is behaviors that you have demonstrated that speak to areas of competencies critical to success on the job. For instance, accuracy and paying attention to detail, or you may have worked cooperatively with others as part of a team. Did you take responsibility for delivering commitments to customers? Describing those types of behaviors are going to speak a lot about you. The fourth hint is employee supervised. You want to give examples of duties you were responsible for as a supervisor. Did you delegate tasks or conduct performance evaluations? Or were you ever involved with training, hiring, or firing? These details will allow the hiring authority to understand the complexity of your position. The last hint is accomplishments. Don't be afraid to toot your own horn. List employee recognition you have received from management or coworkers, or any professional awards or performance bonuses you have received. Statements such as developed and implemented cost reduction measures resulting in a $10,000 savings are a tremendous way not only to speak about an accomplishment, but is also quantified. The last piece of information you provide in each experience block is reason for leaving. Be brief and make it positive. You never want to speak negatively about a former employer. Some good examples for this question are seeking new professional challenges, company restructuring due to a change in ownership, position eliminated due to reduction in funding, relocated, resigned, needed more hours, or may we discuss? This last one shows you are open to discussing the matter of your separation if there were extenuating circumstances and you need more room to explain than the space will allow. In the basic application, there are 4 experience blocks, but you can always add additional experience pages if you need more blocks. At the bottom of page 4, section 8 asks you a question. If requested by a state agency, would you like a copy of your state employment application made available for other similar state positions? Yes or no? On occasion, a few agencies may share applications for hard-to-fill positions, but don't count on it. It clearly says in bold, there is no guarantee that this information will be made available. You can go ahead and answer yes, but know that you must always submit a new application with every position you apply for. Page 5 is the applicant survey. The applicant survey will be separated from your application. The survey information will be kept confidential and used only for computerized statistical reports and other lawful uses. Analysis of the information you and others provide will be used to monitor recruitment and selection practices in state government. The back side of the applicant survey page is titled State of Montana Employment and Benefit Information. This information is here because it is the same information for every state of Montana position. This is where you will find information regarding equal employment opportunity and the policies of the state of Montana. Next is a brief overview of the application and selection process, which is followed by benefits available to state employees and an explanation about reasonable accommodations. Employment preference is for veterans or someone with a disability. An applicant claiming preference must complete the employment preference form and provide documentation of your eligibility for claiming this preference. The Immigration Reform and Control Act specifies you must be able to produce within 3 days of hire documentation that you are able to work in the United States. And finally, the Montana Compliance with Military Selective Service Act simply explains that men selected for state government employment must produce documentation that they are in compliance with the Selective Service Act. Now that you've mastered what is required for the application, let's move on and talk about supplements that may be required with your application.
Supplement required.
Let's look at supplements that may be required when you submit your application. We'll go over how to complete them and tips that may make this process easier. It cannot be said enough. Supplements are an essential part of your application. If you do not complete and submit the required forms, nor answer the supplemental questions, your application may not be considered. Here are a couple types of supplements you may see in a vacancy announcement: a release of information form and questions that must be answered. The release of information form is self-explanatory. It needs to be completed, signed, and submitted with your application. If you have any questions about this form, contact the agency listed on the vacancy announcement. Supplemental questions require more preparation. When you're completing the questions, it's good to keep in mind that your answers will say many things about you. They show your ability to express yourself in writing. They show your ability to follow directions. And they outline the competencies you have gained through training and experience. Supplemental questions are reviewed separately from your application. Therefore, it is important that each answer is able to stand alone. Make sure your answers identify your qualifications, skills, and experience. Every applicant's answers are compared to suggested responses prepared by the hiring authority. We'll look at ways to make your answers shine. Before you start answering the supplemental questions, read the instruction details you find in the vacancy announcement. They are very important. Pay close attention. Don't assume the instructions will be the same for each announcement. This may seem straightforward, but not following the instructions could get your application rejected. First, we will look at the actual format you use for answering your questions. Identify each attached page as yours. At the top of the supplemental answer page, put your name, the position number, and the title of the opening you are applying for. Remember that supplements may be reviewed separately from your application. Don't make the hiring authority guess who wrote the answer. Line spacing may be specified. Single or double space may be required for your answers. There may be a word count or page limit specified. If there is no limit on your response, you can retype the question above your answer. This makes it easier for the hiring authority. If you're limited on space, you don't have to retype the question, so you can maximize the space for your answers. There may be requirements for what must be included in your answers. For example, the instructions may say, it is important to provide specific information regarding names of employers, dates, and job titles. To incorporate this information, you could begin the answer with, during my tenure as an employment consultant with the Missoula Job Service, from April 1999 to the present, I, Then complete your answer. This provides a way to get the required information into your answer. This is not the only way, and you may have other methods that work well for you. Just be sure you include all required information. Once you understand the instructions, you need to read the question carefully and address each aspect. Make sure you answer the question that's being asked. Although this may seem basic, some people miss the point of the question. The hiring authority reviewing your answers are not only judging you on the content, but will also evaluate your ability to communicate effectively in writing. Here are some tips you may want to consider. Write your answer essay form. Be grammatically correct. Use good sentence structure. Have an organized flow of content. Make sure you have no spelling errors. If you're using a word processing program to complete your answers, usually there's a spell check feature available. Make sure it's easy to read. Do not handwrite your answers. Use an easy-to-read font style, such as Times Roman or Arial in 12-point size. Use 1-inch margins. Trying to crunch it all together to make more space will actually make it more difficult to read and understand. Once you have completed your answers, proofread them carefully and consider asking someone else to review them. Now that you know the basic mechanics of getting your questions into a readable format that follows the agency's specific instructions, how do you answer the questions? It's good to keep in mind that when your answer is reviewed, it is compared to a suggested response and scored. It's very important to be specific in your examples so you can score points. Your skills and experience will only be counted if they are written down in black and white. If you do not put them in your answer, the hiring authority will assume you do not have the knowledge, training, or experience required. They will not make any assumptions. Be specific. If you say, I took required math courses, 0 points will be scored. However, if you say, at Hamilton High School, I took algebra and trigonometry. While attending the University of Wisconsin, I took 2 semesters of statistics, 1 semester of numerical analysis, and tutored in the math lab for 4 semesters. That will score you points. Consider all your transferable skills, how they can relate to the question and the position. Let's look at some samples. The first sample comes from an eligibility assistant position with the Department of Public Health and Human Services. I'll read the question. List any personal computer experience or training you have had. List the types of software, for example, Microsoft Word, that you have used. Now let's talk about how to answer the question. Do not use general blanket terms to describe what you know how to do. For instance, saying, I know how to use computers, doesn't tell what you can do. Specify what programs you know and how you use them. For example, in my 3 years as an administrative assistant at XYZ Corporation, I utilized Microsoft Word daily for client correspondence, weekly for reports, quarterly for flyers, and yearly for mail merging. For 2 years while employed at XYZ Corporation's budget and planning aid, I used Excel on a daily basis to track contract information for over 200 businesses and created formulas to calculate budget figures. You might notice that this example quantifies your experience and explains what you know how to do. This second question comes from a case manager position for the Department of Labor and Industry. It states, describe techniques you have used in obtaining necessary information in an interviewing, counseling, or case management situation. Please give specific examples. You will need to develop your answers with the whole story. Describe the situation, the task at hand, the action you took, and the results. Think of situations you have encountered in the workplace that would illustrate your answer. Be specific, make the story flow logically, and remember to show how you think things through. You may have several techniques you use to obtain information. Show how you apply each technique. Just listing them may not be enough to get your idea across. As the instructions say, give specific examples. If you don't, you may not score points. Our last example comes from a supervisor position for the Department of Transportation. It reads, describe your experience in handling multiple project assignments. Be specific as to the length of time. Include your dates of experience. Like the previous examples, you need to outline the time frame of your experience so it can be quantified. This question gives you the opportunity to discuss the complexity of projects you may have experience with, along with your ability to manage multiple priorities. Don't gloss over the details. What were the projects? Were other people involved? What was your part in the process? How did you manage your time to ensure all were completed in a timely manner? The reviewers want to know specific experiences, not how you might handle this situation. These are just 3 examples of supplemental questions you might need to answer. As it takes quite a bit of effort to complete the answers, remember to give yourself enough time to complete them. Print and proofread your answers. Ask someone else to review them for you to ensure you followed the correct format, answered the question, and have a logical flow. Now that you have completed the application and supplements, you are ready to submit your application materials. Our next section will guide you through that process.
Submitting your application.
After all the hard work you just put into completing your application, you'll want to be sure your application will be considered. In this section, we'll talk about submitting your application materials. However, before we get to that, let's first check. Do you have everything required for this position? Review the vacancy announcement and make yourself a checklist. Do you have the completed state application? Any required supplements? Are there certifications required or testing, such as typing or 10-key? These are only a few of the items that might be required. So be sure to check and double check all items. You must sign and date your application. Late, incomplete, or unsigned applications are not considered. Also, the closing date can be found on the vacancy announcement in addition to any specific instructions pertaining to this vacancy. You're now ready to submit your application materials. Your choices are mailing it, dropping it off at the local job service, or faxing it directly to the agency. If you choose to mail your application, remember the vacancy announcement says applications must be received by 5:00 p.m. on the closing date. Please make sure your application is mailed and postmarked before the closing date. Now, some agencies accept postmarks and some don't, so be sure to check the special information section. The mailing address to use is listed on the vacancy announcement. Another option would be to submit your application materials directly to Job Service. Job Service will then date stamp the application and mail it to the correct state agency for you. This will save you the cost of postage and eliminate the concern over the postmark date. Occasionally, there is an option to fax your application materials. Some state agencies cannot accept faxed applications. However, if this option is available, a fax number will be listed with the state agency information on the vacancy announcement. Feel free to contact the state agency listed on the announcement if you have questions about the closing date, time, and/or how they accept the application materials. So, now that you've turned in your application, let's talk about what's happening next. the agency review. Every application received is reviewed by the hiring authority. This is a multi-step process and it can take time to complete. Additionally, the selection process varies from agency to agency. For more information about the review or the screening process, contact the agency listed on the vacancy announcement. Next, you'll hear tips on interviewing.
Interviews.
You completed and submitted your application materials. Not only did you think you did a good job, the hiring authority thinks you did too. You've been scheduled for an interview. All right. Now it's time to prepare. The interview panel can consist of 3 or more people, and you want each to know you are the best candidate. Since there are different interview styles, you will want to be comfortable with each. We'll look at 2 you may encounter: the question and answer and behavioral interviews. The question and answer format is a common interview style. Applicants are asked questions and given a chance to respond. Sometimes follow-up questions are asked. Here are some common questions you might encounter. What unique abilities or qualities would you bring to the job? What are your major strengths and weaknesses? Describe a time you worked on a team project. There are many resources available for potential interview questions. If you need help finding them, ask at your local job service. Or you may want to use the library, internet, your local college or university as resources. If you get sample questions in advance, you can practice answering them out loud. And as hard as it may be for some of us, try out your answers in front of someone. Their feedback can be valuable, and the practice can make you smoother at answering questions. The second type we'd like you to be comfortable with are called behavioral interviews. These are becoming more common. This type of interview is based on the premise that the best way to predict future behavior is to examine past behavior. You will be read the question, and the panel will take notes on your answers. This type of interview is designed to minimize personal impressions and focus on the applicant's actions and behaviors. Here are a few examples. Tell me about a time you prevented unfair or inappropriate behavior by your peers. Tell me about a project you worked on as part of a team and what was your function. Tell me of a time you dealt with an angry customer and what did you do? Here are a few common topics that you might encounter with behavioral interview questions: initiative, decision-making, problem-solving, documentation, or conflict. We'll talk in depth on how to handle questions about conflict a little bit later. Behavioral questions are selected to assist in matching specific traits, skills, and tendencies with the needs of the position. How do you answer these questions? One method that helps you answer the question completely is called the STAR method. This is a framework to help you be sure your answer is thorough. Start with the S, situation. Explain the situation, the time frame, place, and the people involved. Like a play, you must set the stage for your listeners. Give them a clear idea of the situation. Next, the T, task. Explain the task, conflict, or problem that was handled or considered. Once the listeners know what is happening, go on to action. Explain what you did to take part in the task. How did you handle the situation? It doesn't matter what anyone else did. Focus on your part. And finally, give the R, result. Every situation or story has an ending. How did this situation work out? Explain your part of the result and your actions that brought about the ending. Don't jump to the happy ending. Be thorough in expressing all the steps of the situation, the action you took, and the results. Remember that interviewers are looking for your thought process, so fill in the details. Now that you know what types of questions may be asked and how to answer them, let's look at a common question that has to do with how you have handled conflict. You could be asked about conflict with a coworker, a boss, or customer. Since everyone deals with conflict at one time or another in the workplace, it is not reasonable to say you never had any conflict. You don't need to use an extreme example of we fought it out in the back alley. It could be a time you had miscommunication, or you worked on a group project and your ideas were not getting heard. Come up with an answer to the conflict question beforehand so you will be prepared. Tell the situation, the process of how you handled it, and the maturity you showed in resolving it. Now that you have some idea of the types of interviews, question and answer, and behavioral, let's go over some general interviewing tips. Research the agency's website so that you can be prepared to show your knowledge of the agency. Reread your application and the vacancy announcement the morning of your interview. Review the duties, knowledge, skills, and behaviors that were noted in the vacancy announcement to give you clues about what you might be asked. Okay, you've done all the preparation you can. Next, know how to get to the interview and be 10 to 15 minutes early. Greet the interviewer with a confident handshake. You may be given a specified time alone in the interview room to prepare your answers to pre-selected questions. If you are, use this time wisely. Just jot down brief notes to help you cover all the points you want to remember. When you're interviewing, keep balanced eye contact with each person in the room. Make each feel you are talking to them. You can show interest in the agency and position by asking questions at the end of the interview. Send a thank you note to the interviewers. Let them know you appreciate the time they took and reiterate why you are a good fit for the job. And finally, relax.
Thank you for watching this video. I do encourage you to take enough time to complete the application and the supplemental questions. It is a multi-step process, but I encourage you to be persistent. And remember, employment consultants at any Montana Job Service office will be glad to assist you should you have any questions. And finally, good luck with your application.